Warning: this video is a dark humor animation created for adults. Watching it may trigger past traumas and cause emotional distress. The day you were born, your mother swore she loved you more than anything in the world. And maybe she did. But as you grew, you realized that love came with strings, and not the soft, comforting kind. Nope, these were the thick, tangled ropes of expectations, guilt trips, and carefully disguised ultimatums. You didn't know it yet, but your entire childhood was a chessboard, and she always played 5 moves ahead. Every bedtime story, every lovingly packed lunch, every tear she wiped away had a price tag, one you wouldn't notice until later. And let's just say the interest rates were brutal. Life with a manipulative mother doesn't hit you like a truck, it's more like slow-motion quicksand. You don't even realize you're sinking until you're waist-deep in guilt and self-doubt. As a kid, it's all about compliance. Oh, honey, you can't possibly want to wear that shirt. You'll embarrass yourself. Or, of course you don't want to go to that sleepover. What if they don't like you? And just like that, your choices are never really your own. You think you're avoiding mistakes, but really, you're avoiding freedom. Psychologists call this enmeshment, but let's call it what it is, a lifelong game of psychological tug-of-war. She pulls, you resist, and before you know it, you're too tired to hold the rope anymore. Every decision you make feels like a minefield, because you've been trained to second-guess your instincts. After all, mother knows best, right? When you were 5, she'd crouch down to your level, tousle your hair, and say, "You're my little hero. You'll always take care of mommy, right?" You'd nod, chest puffed with pride. Who wouldn't want to be a hero? Except you didn't realize that being her little hero meant taking on the emotional weight of a grown adult, one passive-aggressive sigh at a time. By the time you're 6, you've mastered the art of reading her moods like a meteorologist predicting a storm. If her tone is overly sweet, it means she wants something. If she's quiet, you've done something wrong, you just don't know what yet. And when the storm does hit, it's never her fault. No, it's the world or your father or, surprise, it's you. If only you'd listened to me, this wouldn't have happened. The guilt sinks its claws in deep, and you start to believe it. Because if you don't, you risk the unthinkable, losing her approval. In her universe, there was one central truth. She was the sun, and everyone else, including you, was a planet in orbit. If you dared to drift out of alignment, cue the solar flares. Forgot to text her back immediately? I guess I'm just not important to you anymore. Wanted to hang out with your friends instead of having dinner with her? I sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay me? You feel the enmeshment even in your innermost being. It's when the boundaries between parent and child blur so much that their needs and emotions become indistinguishable from yours. School becomes your first taste of independence, but even there, she's got her fingers in the pie. Your success is hers, your failures are yours, and the scoreboard is forever rigged. By the time you hit middle school, you'd started to notice that other kids' moms didn't call the principal every time their kid got a B-. Nor did they demand daily reports on who you talked to at lunch. "I'm just trying to help," she'd say, her voice dripping with honey. And maybe she believed that, but there's a fine line between guidance and control, and she wielded her help like a puppet master pulling strings. Let's not forget the social life, or lack thereof. Friends are carefully vetted, not by you, but by her. "I don't like the way Tommy's mom talks to people," she'd say, effectively banning you from ever going to Tommy's house again. Slowly, you stop bringing up new friends altogether. It's just easier that way. And so, you grow up lonely, mistaking her possessiveness for love. But here's the kicker, it's not all bad. There are moments of genuine tenderness that confuse the hell out of you. The way she makes your favorite soup when you're sick. The way she tells stories that make you laugh until your sides hurt. These fleeting glimpses of warmth keep you tethered, convincing you that maybe, just maybe, she's not as bad as you think. It's emotional whiplash at its finest, and it leaves you dizzy. Over time, you've developed a coping mechanism that could rival a therapist's toolbox. That maybe, just maybe, you're the problem. This is the beauty of manipulation. It makes you question your reality. Gaslighting, they call it. A term straight out of a psychological horror film, except this is your life. You're constantly walking a tightrope, trying to balance between her needs and your sanity. Spoiler alert, she always wins. Let's pause for a second and talk about the psychology behind this. Manipulative behavior often stems from a deep-seated insecurity. Your mom, she probably grew up feeling powerless, and controlling you is her way of regaining that power. It's not an excuse, but it is an explanation. Understanding this doesn't make it easier, though. If anything, it adds another layer of guilt because now you feel sorry for her, even when she's the one making your life a minefield. High school was when the gaslighting kicked into overdrive. "You're so ungrateful," she'd say after you asked for a little space. "I'm only hard on you because I know how much potential you have. Want to join the basketball team? Are you sure you're cut out for that? It's a lot of pressure. Thinking about applying to art school? But how will you ever make a living?" Her doubts become your inner voice, and soon, you're too scared to even dream. You start questioning your feelings, your instincts. Did she really say that cruel thing? Or are you just being sensitive? Is she controlling, or is she just a caring parent? The mental gymnastics alone could have qualified you for the Olympics. Love from a manipulative mother isn't straightforward. It's more like a maze, with dead ends marked, "You'll regret this," and hidden doors labeled, "Prove you love me." When she says, "I only want what's best for you," what she really means is, "I want what's best for me, but I'll phrase it like it's about you so you can't argue." Need an example? Okay, picture this. You get into your dream college, on the other side of the country. You're thrilled, but when you tell her, her face falls. "Oh, I'm so happy for you," she says, with all the enthusiasm of someone announcing their tax audit. Then comes the sigh. "It's just, I don't know what I'll do without you." And just like that, your excitement is tinged with guilt. Congratulations, you're now considering giving up your dreams because someone else can't handle their emotions. Psychologists call this emotional blackmail. It's when someone uses fear, guilt, or obligation to manipulate you into doing what they want. But let's call it what it really is, a Jedi mind trick, except instead of waving her hand and saying, "These aren't the droids you're looking for," she's waving her tears and saying, "You're a horrible child if you leave me." College becomes your first real escape, but even then, she's just a phone call away. You're coming home for Thanksgiving, right? It's not like you have anyone else to spend it with. The guilt trips are her bread and butter, and you've developed a Pavlovian response to her ringtone. By the time you graduate, you're a mess of contradictions. Independent yet unsure, confident yet insecure, free yet tethered. Manipulation thrives on self-doubt, and by the time you realize what's happening, it's already wrapped around you like a constrictor snake. And just like that snake, the tighter you try to wriggle free, the harder it squeezes. And as you step into adulthood, you realize the hardest part isn't breaking away from her. It's breaking away from the version of yourself she created. If growing up with a manipulative mother was a crash course in emotional gymnastics, adulthood is where the Real Marathon begins. By the time you've made it to your 20s, you're a well-oiled machine of guilt management and self-doubt. Manipulative mothers have a sixth sense for when you're starting to feel good about yourself. Got a promotion? She'll find a way to make it about her. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You know, I always told you to work hard." "Sure, Mom. And let's not forget the guilt trips. These aren't your standard. I'm disappointed in you, fair. These are award-winning performances, complete with crocodile tears and lines like, 'I just don't know what I did to deserve such an ungrateful child.' You'd think you'd burned her house down instead of, forgetting to call her back. It's a masterclass in manipulation. She'd frame her doubts as concern, her critiques as encouragement, and her meddling as love. And the worst part, you'd start believing her. Every choice felt wrong. Every success felt undeserved. Imposter syndrome didn't just knock on your door. It moved in, unpacked its bags, and became your new roommate. But here's the kicker. Even as an adult, you're still chasing her approval. You know it's a trap. This is where the psychology sneaks in. Growing up under constant manipulation conditions you to seek external validation, especially from the person who withheld it the most. It's called intermittent reinforcement, and it's the same tactic casinos use to keep gamblers hooked. Except instead of a jackpot, you're hoping for "you're not a total disappointment" from your mom. Then came the relationships. Dating when you've grown up with a manipulative mother is like trying to run a marathon with a sprained ankle. Your idea of love is so tangled up in control and guilt that you might mistake red flags for carnival decorations. If your partner doesn't text back immediately, you're spiraling. If they're too affectionate, you're suspicious. And don't even get me started on conflict. You either avoid it like the plague or go nuclear at the slightest hint of criticism. Thanks, Mom, for that stellar emotional toolkit. The cycle repeated itself so many times that you started second-guessing every romantic decision. Was this person actually wrong for you, or were you just preemptively sabotaging things to avoid your mother's judgment? Hard to say. What's easier to say is that therapy should probably be covered by health insurance. Thanks, America. Somehow, against all odds, you eventually found someone who could put up with your baggage. Marriage doesn't shield you from her antics either. In fact, it's like giving her a new playground. Suddenly, every disagreement with your spouse becomes her business. "I told you they weren't right for you," she'll say, conveniently forgetting that she also criticized the last 3 people you dated. And if you have kids, oh boy, get ready for a masterclass in passive-aggressive grandparenting. She'll spoil them rotten while subtly undermining your parenting. You're too strict, she'll coo as she hands your toddler a candy bar right before bedtime. But here's the twist. As much as she's a thorn in your side, you can't completely cut her out. Manipulative mothers have a way of anchoring themselves in your life. Maybe it's because you're an optimist who keeps hoping she'll change. Or maybe it's because society keeps telling you to honor thy mother, no matter how many therapy sessions it takes. In her twilight years, things get complicated. She might soften, or at least pretend to. Maybe she'll say she regrets some of her actions. Maybe she won't. Either way, the power dynamic shifts as she becomes more dependent on you. Suddenly, you're the caregiver. It's a strange role reversal that's equal parts empowering and infuriating. You're no longer the scared kid seeking approval. You're the adult deciding whether or not to answer her third phone call of the day. And as she ages, you start to see her humanity. The cracks in her armor. The vulnerabilities she tried so hard to hide. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but it explains it. Maybe she grew up in a household where love was conditional. Maybe she's just as much a victim of her upbringing as you are of hers. It's a sobering realization that leaves you feeling equal parts angry and compassionate. In the end, having a manipulative mother is like living with a shadow that never quite goes away. But here's the silver lining. You learn resilience. You learn to set boundaries, even if it takes years to figure out how. You learn to untangle the web of guilt and self-doubt she spun around you. And most importantly, you learn that you're not defined by her manipulations.